Father forbade his daughter to marry. But at the wedding, he fell to his knees. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I never thought I'd have to choose between my father and the man I loved. Growing up in our house on Elm Street, with its manicured lawn and white picket fence, I believed love was simple. My father, Thomas Wellington, had always been my hero. The successful lawyer who came home every evening with stories from the courthouse and pockets full of peppermints. He taught me to ride a bicycle, helped with homework at the kitchen table, and walked me to school every morning until I was old enough to be embarrassed by such displays of paternal devotion. My little princess, he'd call me, ruffling my hair as I sat on his lap reading bedtime stories. You're going to marry a prince someday, just like in the fairy tales. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Father knew everything about everything. He commanded respect in courtrooms, earned 6 figures annually, and owned the biggest house on our street. When neighbors needed legal advice, they knocked on our door. When charity organizations needed board members, they called Thomas Wellington first. Our Christmas parties were legendary, our summer barbecues the social event of the season. Mother, gentle and diplomatic, orbited around Father's certainty like a devoted moon. She managed his schedule, hosted his colleagues, and smoothed any rough edges with her soft smile and endless patience. Together, they formed the perfect power couple of our small Connecticut town, successful, respected, enviable. I grew up assuming I'd marry someone exactly like Father. Someone with a law degree from Yale. Someone who wore 3-piece suits and belonged to the country club. Someone who could provide the life of comfort and status I'd always known. It never occurred to me that love might have different plans. Then I met Michael. It was at the community center where I volunteered teaching art to underprivileged children, a gesture Father approved of as appropriate charity work for a Wellington daughter. Michael was installing new lighting fixtures, balanced on a ladder with tool belt hanging low on his hips and concentration furrowing his brow. When he looked down and smiled at me, something in my chest fluttered like trapped butterflies. "Careful up there," I called out, surprising myself with the flirtatious tone. "Don't worry, darling, I know what I'm doing," he replied in an accent that spoke of working-class neighborhoods and honest labor. Michael Santos was everything my father had never imagined for me. He was an electrician who'd learned his trade through night school while working construction to support his sick mother. His hands were calloused from honest work. His truck was secondhand but meticulously maintained, and his apartment was small but spotless. He read voraciously philosophy, history, poetry, checking books out from the library because he couldn't afford to buy them. We fell in love over coffee dates that stretched into evening walks, over conversations about books and dreams and the future we wanted to build together. Michael had plans. He wanted to start his own electrical contracting business, maybe expand into solar panel installation as the green energy movement grew. He spoke about these dreams with the kind of passion I'd never heard in Father's calculated discussions of legal strategy and portfolio management. "I want to build something," Michael told me one evening as we sat by the lake, watching the sunset paint the water gold. "Not just make money, but actually create something that matters. Solar panels on every roof, you know? Help people become independent, help the environment." I loved his vision, his integrity, his unwavering kindness to everyone from the coffee shop barista to the elderly woman whose electricity he'd repaired for free when she couldn't afford to pay. I loved the way he listened when I talked about my art. The way he encouraged my painting when even I doubted my talent. I loved how he made me laugh, how he challenged my assumptions, how he saw the world through eyes unclouded by privilege and prejudice. The first time I brought Michael home for dinner, I should have recognized the warning signs. Father's handshake was perfunctory, his smile strained. Throughout the meal, he asked pointed questions about Michael's education, his family background, his career prospects. Michael answered honestly and respectfully. But I could see Father's disapproval growing with each admission that Michael hadn't attended college, hadn't grown up in the right neighborhood, didn't belong to the right social circles. "He seems nice," Mother said diplomatically after Michael left, carefully avoiding Father's thunderous expression. "Nice," Father repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "Nice doesn't pay for a house in the right neighborhood, Caroline. Nice doesn't provide security or social standing. Nice is what we say about people we don't want to hurt by telling the truth." "What truth?" I demanded, already feeling defensive. "That he's not good enough for you, Sarah. You're a Wellington. You deserve someone who can give you the life you've been raised to expect." "Maybe I don't want the life you've planned for me. Maybe I want to choose my own path." Father's face darkened. "Don't be naive. Love doesn't pay bills or put food on the table. Passion fades, but financial security and social standing last forever." That was the beginning of our war. For months, Father waged a systematic campaign against my relationship with Michael. He'd invite eligible young men to dinner lawyers' sons, doctors, investment bankers, and seat them next to me with obvious intent. He'd mention job openings at prestigious firms that would take me far from town, far from Michael. He'd reminisce loudly about neighbors' daughters who'd married well, emphasizing their husbands' impressive credentials and substantial incomes. When subtle pressure failed, Father became more direct. He'd criticize Michael's clothes, his truck, his grammar. He'd question whether someone from Michael's background could truly understand or appreciate our family's values. He'd worry aloud about what people would think, how it would reflect on the Wellington name to have a blue-collar son-in-law. "You're being a snob," I accused him during one particularly heated argument. "I'm being a realist," he shot back. "I'm trying to protect you from a mistake that could ruin your entire life." "You mean it could embarrass you at the country club?" "Don't be ridiculous. This has nothing to do with my reputation." But we both knew it did. Father had built his identity around being the successful patriarch, the man whose family exemplified achievement and respectability. Having a daughter marry an electrician didn't fit the narrative he'd constructed about the Wellington legacy. Michael bore the brunt of Father's disapproval with grace that amazed me. He never spoke ill of my father, never asked me to choose sides, never let the constant criticism embitter him. He simply loved me steadily, patiently, while Father's hostility grew more pronounced. "Your father loves you," Michael would say when I'd come to him in tears after another confrontation. "He's afraid of losing you, and fear makes people do stupid things. Give him time." "How can you be so understanding?" "He treats you terribly." "Because I know what it's like to love you. If I had a daughter like you, I'd probably be just as protective." But Father's protection felt more like possession, his love more like control. The worse it got, the more determined I became to prove my independence. When Michael proposed on Christmas Eve, presenting me with his grandmother's modest but beautiful engagement ring, I said yes without hesitation. The reaction at home was explosive. "Absolutely not," Father declared when I showed them the ring. "I forbid it. You can't forbid me from marrying the man I love. I'm 26 years old. As long as you live under my roof and depend on my support, you'll follow my rules." "Then maybe I won't live under your roof anymore." The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a discharged gun. Mother's face went white. Father's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. "If you marry that man," Father said slowly, each word deliberate and cutting, "don't expect me to be there. Don't expect my blessing, my support, or my presence in your life. Choose him, and you choose to lose your family." I stared at him. This man who'd been my hero and protector, seeing him clearly for the first time. His love came with conditions. His approval depended on my obedience. The father I'd idolized was revealed as a man whose pride mattered more than his daughter's happiness. "Fine," I whispered, pulling the engagement ring from my finger and sliding it back on defiantly. "Then I choose him." I moved out the next day, taking only what I could carry in 2 suitcases. Michael helped me find a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but clean and affordable on our combined incomes. We set a wedding date for June, 6 months away, and began planning a modest ceremony that we could afford without Father's financial support. Mother called every day, crying and pleading. "He doesn't mean it, sweetheart. He's just upset. He'll come around." But Father didn't call at all. When I ran into him at the grocery store, he looked right through me as if I were a stranger. When Mother invited both of us to lunch, hoping to broker peace, Father canceled at the last minute. He'd written me out of his life as completely as if I'd never existed. The next months were the hardest of my life. Every milestone of wedding planning was shadowed by Father's absence. Looking at venues, I'd imagine the empty chair where he should sit. Shopping for my dress, I'd think about how he wouldn't be there to walk me down the aisle. Addressing invitations, I'd stare at his name on the guest list, knowing he wouldn't come. Michael's family embraced me completely. His mother, a tiny woman with calloused hands and enormous heart, fussed over me like I was her own daughter. His sister helped with wedding preparations. His brother-in-law offered to walk me down the aisle if my father wouldn't. They couldn't understand how a parent could abandon a child over something as arbitrary as social class. "In my family," Michael's mother told me while we altered my dress, "we care about character, not credentials. Your Michael, he's got the best heart of any man I know. Your father is a fool if he can't see that." But understanding Father's foolishness didn't ease the pain. This was the man who'd taught me to drive, who'd sat through every school play and art exhibition, who'd promised to dance at my wedding. Now he was missing the most important day of my life because his pride mattered more than my happiness. Mother tried desperately to play peacemaker, shuttling between Father and me like a diplomatic envoy. She'd report that he missed me, that he asked about me when he thought she wasn't listening, that he kept my childhood pictures on his desk at work. But he wouldn't bend, wouldn't admit he might be wrong, wouldn't consider that his daughter's happiness was worth more than his social expectations. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mother came to my apartment with red-rimmed eyes and news that made my heart sink. "He hired a private investigator," she confessed, wringing her hands, "to look into Michael's background, his family, looking for anything that might convince you to call off the wedding. Did he find anything?" "Nothing. Michael is exactly who he appears to be. A good man from a working-class family who's built an honest life through hard work." She paused, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I think that's what your father can't forgive. That there's nothing wrong with Michael except his bank account and his zip code." I felt something break inside me. Father's rejection was complete. He'd rather hire strangers to investigate the man I loved than trust his daughter's judgment, or consider that he might be wrong. The night before my wedding, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by flowers and final preparations, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Michael was at his bachelor party, a modest gathering at his brother's house, and I was left with my thoughts and my grief. Tomorrow should be the happiest day of my life, but Father's absence would cast a shadow over everything. I picked up the phone a dozen times, thinking about calling him, about making one last attempt at reconciliation. But I knew it was useless. Father had made his position clear. His love came with conditions I couldn't meet. The wedding morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe was mocking my internal storm. Mother arrived early to help me get ready. Her eyes still swollen from crying, but her smile determinedly cheerful. "You look beautiful," she whispered as she fastened my grandmother's pearls around my neck. "Just like a princess." Father used to call me his princess, the memory cut like a knife. The ceremony was held in the garden of the community center where Michael and I had met. Appropriate, since we couldn't afford a church wedding and this place held special meaning for us. Michael's family had transformed the space with flowers and white ribbons, creating something magical from their love and limited budget. I stood at the back of the garden in my simple but elegant dress, holding a bouquet of daisies. My favorite flowers, though Father had always insisted roses were more appropriate for a Wellington. Michael waited at the altar, handsome in his rented tuxedo, his face radiant with joy and love. All our friends were there. Michael's extended family filled half the chairs. Even some of Mother's friends had come, despite the social awkwardness of my father's public rejection of the groom. but the chair where Father should have sat remained pointedly empty, a visible reminder of his stubborn pride. Michael's brother-in-law offered me his arm, ready to fulfill his promise to walk me down the aisle. I took a deep breath, preparing to take this final step without my father's blessing, when commotion erupted at the garden entrance. Father stood there, breathing hard as if he'd run the entire way. His usually perfect suit was wrinkled, his tie askew, his carefully styled hair disheveled. He looked around the garden wildly, his eyes finding me in my wedding dress, and something in his expression broke. The entire gathering fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Everyone knew the story. The proud father who'd rejected his daughter's choice, the ultimatum, the months of painful estrangement. No one knew why he was here or what he intended. I stood frozen, my bouquet trembling in my hands. Was he here to stop the ceremony? To make one final attempt to convince me to abandon Michael? To publicly humiliate us all with his disapproval? Father walked slowly down the aisle, his steps heavy with purpose. I could see Mother's face, hope and fear warring in her expression. I could see Michael, tense and ready to protect me from whatever scene Father might create. I could see the guests, holding their breath, waiting for drama to unfold. When Father reached me, he stopped and looked into my eyes for the first time in 6 months. What I saw there wasn't anger or disapproval. It was pain raw, overwhelming pain that matched my own. "Sarah," he whispered, and his voice broke on my name. Then, to everyone's shock, my proud father, the man who commanded courtrooms and never showed weakness, fell to his knees before me. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, his shoulders shaking with the force of his emotion. "I'm so sorry, my darling girl. I've been a fool, a proud, stubborn fool." I stared down at him, this powerful man reduced to tears at my feet, and felt my own composure shatter. "Daddy? I thought I was protecting you. I thought I knew what was best. But these months without you?" He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "I've lost my princess. I've lost my daughter. I've lost the most precious thing in my life because I was too proud to admit I might be wrong." The garden was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. When your mother told me about the investigator's report, about what a good man Michael is, how much he loves you, how hard he works. Father's voice cracked. "I realized I wasn't protecting you from making a mistake. I was making the mistake. I was letting my pride and prejudice destroy the most important relationship in my life." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I went to see Michael yesterday. I asked his permission to give you this." He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond necklace that had belonged to his mother. "I wanted to give you something for your wedding day. Something to show that I accept your choice, that I'm proud of the woman you've become, that I want to be part of your life again." I was crying now, ugly sobs that made my makeup run and my bouquet shake. "You talked to Michael?" He could have thrown me out. After everything I've done, everything I've said, he had every right to slam the door in my face. Instead, he invited me in, made me coffee, and listened while I explained what a scared, stupid old man I'd been. Father wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "He told me he loves you more than life itself, that he'd spend every day proving he's worthy of you, that all he wants is to make you happy." I looked across the garden at Michael, who was watching this scene unfold with tears in his own eyes. He nodded at me, giving me the same gentle smile that had captured my heart in this very place. "And then," Father continued, "he told me something that broke my heart and opened my eyes. He said he'd been hoping that someday I'd realize love isn't about bank accounts or social status, that if I could just see past my prejudices, I'd discover he and I want the same thing, for you to be happy and loved and protected." Father struggled to his feet, his knees protesting the unaccustomed genuflection. He took my hands in his, and I felt the familiar warmth of his touch, the safety I'd always associated with his presence. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said quietly. "I've been cruel and small-minded. I've hurt you and Michael and your mother. I've let my pride nearly destroy our family. But if you'll have me, if you'll let this foolish old man back into your life, I promise to spend every day trying to make up for what I've done." I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. 6 months of pain and anger and grief were dissolving into forgiveness and relief and overwhelming love for this flawed but beloved man who'd raised me. "I love you, Daddy," I whispered. "I've always loved you. I just needed you to love me enough to let me choose my own happiness. I do love you. More than my pride, more than my reputation, more than anything in this world." He cupped my face in his hands the way he had when I was little and had scraped my knee or hurt my feelings. "Will you let me walk you down the aisle? Will you let me give my blessing to this marriage?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Father offered me his arm, and together we walked toward Michael, toward my future, toward a family reunited by love conquering pride. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything I'd dreamed of. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden as Father officially gave me away, his voice strong and clear as he told Michael, "Take care of my daughter. Love her as much as I do, and you'll make her the happiest woman in the world." Michael's response was equally emotional. "I promise, sir. I'll spend my life proving I'm worthy of the trust you're placing in me." When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, Father was the first to embrace us both, welding us together in a hug that felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. The reception was small but perfect, held in the community center where our love story had begun. Father danced with me to "Daddy's Little Girl," both of us crying through the entire song. He toasted Michael, publicly acknowledging his son-in-law's character and integrity, admitting his own mistakes with a humility that shocked everyone who knew him. "I judged this young man by his bank account instead of his character," Father told the gathering. "I nearly lost my daughter because I thought I knew better than her heart. But love isn't about money or status. It's about finding someone who sees the best in you and brings out the best in you. Michael does that for Sarah, and I couldn't be more grateful to welcome him into our family." Later, as Michael and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, I caught sight of my parents at their table. Father had his arm around Mother, and they were watching us with the kind of joy I hadn't seen on their faces in months. Father looked older than I remembered, as if the months of estrangement had aged him. But he also looked lighter, as if laying down the burden of his pride had freed him from a weight he'd been carrying too long. "Your father's a good man," Michael whispered in my ear as we swayed to the music. "He was just scared of losing you. How can you forgive him so easily? After everything he put us through? Because he loves you the way I love you, completely, fiercely, sometimes foolishly. And because holding on to anger would poison what we have. Today is about new beginnings, not old grievances." That was my husband, generous and wise, seeing the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. Father had been right about one thing. I was marrying a remarkable man. He'd just been wrong about what made Michael remarkable. As our first year of marriage unfolded, Father threw himself into building a relationship with Michael with the same intensity he'd once devoted to opposing him. He hired Michael's company for electrical work at his law office, recommended him to friends and colleagues, and took genuine interest in Michael's dreams of expanding into solar energy. When Michael's business took off, partly due to Father's connections and referrals, Father was as proud as if his son-in-law's success was his own achievement. I was wrong about him. Father admitted to me one Sunday dinner at their house, watching Michael play with his nephew in the backyard. Not just wrong about his prospects, but wrong about what matters. I spent so much time worrying about whether he could provide for you financially that I never considered whether he could provide for you emotionally. Now I see that he gives you something no amount of money could buy: unconditional love. The grandchildren came eventually. 2 beautiful children who called their grandfather Grandpa Tom and climbed all over him during family gatherings. Father spoiled them shamelessly, reading them the same bedtime stories he'd once read to me, teaching them to ride bicycles in the same patient way he'd taught me. Watching him with my children, Seeing the pure joy on his face, I understood something important about love and forgiveness. Father's rejection hadn't been about not loving me enough. It had been about loving me too much. So much that the thought of losing me to someone he perceived as unworthy had driven him to desperate measures. His pride and prejudice had nearly cost him everything that mattered, but love had ultimately proved stronger than fear. The private investigator's report still sits in Father's desk drawer, he told me years later. Not as evidence of Michael's unworthiness, but as a reminder of his own mistakes. Sometimes, he said, he'd read it when he felt his old prejudices stirring, remembering the lesson it had taught him about judging people by their character rather than their circumstances. That report saved our family, Father told me on my 5th wedding anniversary. Not because of what it revealed about Michael, but because of what it revealed about me. I'd become the kind of man who hired strangers to investigate his daughter's happiness instead of trusting her judgment. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't want to be. Today, 15 years later, Father and Michael have a relationship that goes far beyond mere acceptance. They golf together on weekends, discuss business and politics over dinner, and collaborate on home improvement projects with the comfortable familiarity of old friends. Michael seeks Father's advice on major decisions, and Father values Michael's perspective on everything from investments to grandparenting. Mother often says that the wedding day when Father fell to his knees was the day he became the man she'd always known he could be. Someone who valued love over status, character over credentials, humility over pride. It was the day our family learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is admitting you're wrong and asking for forgiveness. The community center where Michael and I met still hosts weddings in its garden. Sometimes I drive by and see other young couples taking their vows, and I wonder if any of them are facing the kind of family opposition we overcame. I hope their stories end as happily as ours did. I hope they learn, as we did, that love real, honest, forgiving love is always stronger than pride. And sometimes when I see a father walking his daughter down the aisle, I remember the weight of Father's arm in mine that day, the tremble in his voice as he gave me away, the tears of joy and relief on his face as he welcomed Michael into our family. It was the day I learned that love isn't about being right. It's about being willing to admit when you're wrong and fight to make things right again. Father kept his promise. He spent every day after my wedding making up for those months of estrangement, proving that his love was bigger than his pride. And in doing so, he gave me the greatest wedding gift of all, the knowledge that family love, like married love, can weather any storm if both sides are willing to bend before they break.